Welcome to Lab Notes. I'm Joe Fetterman from Colliers Life Sciences Advisors. We have a special treat today. We're here with Patrick Dentinger. Patrick is the founder and CEO of Absorption Systems, now a Pharmaron company. Patrick, welcome to Lab Notes.
Thank you, Joe. Nice to be here.
It's a treat to have you here. We've had some great conversations, and I'm excited to share some of your story with our audience. Let's begin. I think we talked about a great question. How in the world did you fall into this racket anyway?
um, my early stages in my career were involved with as a bench scientist working in the area of drug delivery, trying to deliver molecules that didn't want to reach their destination or had significant barriers. And so I had worked with a number of startups, and along the way, one of the things we had determined is that the projects we were working on didn't have a fundamental understanding of the biology. So no matter what technology we had, we really didn't know what the problem was we were facing. And that's sort of the evolution of where the company came from, is that we established a concept of evaluating where the true barriers to delivering a molecule were. And once we knew that, then you could sort of pair that up with the appropriate technology to deliver it. That's sort of how we came about.
So let's talk a little bit about the creation of Absorption Systems, the name, and how that came to be. I can imagine, given the noticing that there was a problem that needed to be solved, it must have been a really exciting time when you and your partner formed the company.
It was a great time, and my business partner in this was a gentleman named Ismael Hidalgo, who is still with Pharmaron today. Both of us are still here. Ismael's had done some seminal work at the University of Kansas as a postdoc, where he actually had characterized a cell line that predicted human drug absorption. And what was unique about this is you could do this in more or less a petri dish as opposed to having to dose a human. And when we were introduced to each other, my background in drug delivery systems, as I mentioned before, we really struggled understanding what the root cause of drug absorption was. He was on the other side of characterizing the root cause, and hence we got together. We named it Absorption Systems because we thought that was great, but it almost immediately became limiting, because to deliver a drug, it's more than just absorption, it's metabolism, it's all different types of excretion, all different types of parameters. But we got the URL and it worked, so we locked it in. But the evolution in the business case for us really centered around in the mid-90s, when a technology that had emerged called combinatorial chemistry came about. And this is where it was chemistry techniques that introduced automation to the process. So instead of making one compound at a time and testing it, they were able to make 100,000 in an afternoon. This sort of shifted the bottleneck of how do you identify of those 100,000, which is the needle in the haystack. And it went to combinatorial chemistry. Then they would screen them all in robotic systems and find what they called hits. Well, I amped it up tremendously, the process. We were sitting behind that process, that was the business case, to profile these molecules for drug-like properties. Are they absorbed? Are they metabolized? These type of things. So in the mid-90s, combinatorial chemistry was huge. The hope and the potential was there. High throughput screening was coming along. And we had a company that we were going to set up that sat behind that with all these sort of techniques to profile drug-like properties. The business case, the model, everything looked beautiful. We had modeled this out where we were going to be screening tens of thousands of compounds a month and all of this. It was great fun. It never happened, but it was a great story. It was a great story.
Well, in that evolution, what I've come to understand is Absorption Systems provide some very specialized assistance to drug development companies working their way through the clinical process. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. When we started the company, we actually focused in the small molecule space, the traditional, pop a pill, put an eye drop in your eye, and all of that. But our underlying technology was in the biology, and with the biology, we use analytical tools to follow whatever I'm dosing. Well, small molecules is associated with usually mass spectrometry. Larger molecules like protein are associated with ELISAs and protein detection. And then cell and gene therapy is all associated with, looking at PCR, different types of gene expression throughout the organism. We have evolved to do all of those. And what happens is, as we develop these analytical techniques to predict human outcomes, that's our whole gist, to predict human outcomes. A lot of these tests we develop are tests for detection of either biomarkers or the molecule itself in a clinical setting. So the research we do leads itself through development into the clinic, and a lot of our testing carries through. To this day now, with the cell and gene therapy space, that testing carries through not only from the early sort of discovery development, but all the way through GMP testing, so releasing product. So over the years, we started out as a pure research play. We evolved through the clinic and into manufacturing. Again, all of this testing we do is laboratory based, and a lot of it is designed to predict a human outcome. And that's where we came about. One thing I should mention, that in the mid 90s, a lot of these in vitro techniques that we use today are well known in academia and industry, but they hadn't been fully embraced as tools to be able to replace human testing. During our existence, that has evolved and changed. And today now we are doing things where in certain instances in the generic industry, we're able to waive out of human testing by running a simple in vitro test in a lab here. So it's really evolved. We watch the FDA evolve. We watch the FDA evolve in the cell and gene therapy space, which is happening almost on a minute by minute basis because of what they're learning. So this evolution has been actually very exciting, very exciting.
Well, and I'm imagining with all the things that you're talking about, that was contributory to the Farmeron transaction. Um, I think you've shared a little bit about that story, but let's roll back a little bit. How did that conversation come to be, and tell us a little bit more about what actually happened there?
Yeah, Absorption itself was is a privately held company, so there were no investors in the company. We just had an idea. We put a lab together on our own nickel and started making money with it. And we kind of like that sort of freedom that we didn't have to sort of answer to anybody. As we were growing, though, that type of growth tends to be a little less aggressive just because of not taking down a lot of debt or not bringing in investors. We had reached a point in about 4 or 5 years ago, especially driven by the cell and gene therapy space, that we were going to need to grow much faster than the rate we were growing, and that was going to require capital. We needed facility upgrades up in Boston, we needed a facility upgrade in San Diego, and we needed an operation in Europe. So we set out with, we retained an investment banker, we set out to raise private equity money. And that was our goal. And during that process, a number of strategics showed up along the way. It was never our intention to sell the company at this point, but when the strategics showed up and we looked at the infrastructure, we looked at how they were approaching the cell and gene therapy space, it became pretty clear that they were a viable option to kind of achieve the growth we were looking for. And it just so happened that Farmeron was in that play, and it was I think a very good fit because they had very little presence in cell and gene therapy, but they have a lot of money. So it has worked out. We ended up going that route. That's how it played out.
You talked about one of the potential offshoots that didn't actually come to be, but I think there have been some others, and I'm curious. You're incredibly entrepreneurial. What are the other things that have actually come to the fore as you've developed absorption systems and then advanced to the acquisition that Farmeron
Yeah.
made?
So a couple of things that we had done along the way as you sort of grow as a company, you develop tools and techniques for processes. And what we had done is a lot of our services, because we're using cell-based assays for regulatory approval, that entails enables the FDA to show up at any time and audit the work we were doing. And in fact, that has been going on since our existence. But cell culture and working with cells has sort of a unique component to it because it's a living, viable system. And with all the tools and techniques and therapeutic areas that we've gotten into, one of the big challenges is, if you're relying on a cell to provide analytical testing, you want to make sure that the cell hasn't changed too much on you, because these things, they evolve in your presence. FDA comes in, looks at our operation, and was really, really anxious and thorough in their understanding of, do you keep track of your cells? And can you tell us how they're performing? As a result of that, we saw that the audit process was pretty labor intensive, and a lot of it involved traceability and transparency. We had all the paperwork to support it, but when you're doing cell culture over the course of a year, there was strong interest in understanding how the cells were performing during that time, who touched them, what you were feeding them with. What we had done is we had gone out to the market and looked for products that could help us trace all this information, and didn't find anything. So we built our own. And so we built a system, we built software. It's a very sophisticated LIMS system, but it tracks the life of a cell in our shop from when it is ordered and received to either when it's used in an experiment or eventually sometime in the future be put into a patient. With that, we had developed a pretty sophisticated system, and we decided at some point, because it's been around for a while, we would not sell that. So that was spun off, and that's off to its own. But a very exciting space, because it starts layering in big data analytics, AI. This is a whole new realm of monitoring how the cell performance goes. And there is a big interest in this space. That's also an exciting avenue.
Yeah, I mean, with the explosion of cell and gene work, I can only imagine how important that kind of a
Yep.
tool becomes. That's incredibly exciting. Well, you've had some visibility to Boston, San Diego, but you've really grown up as a life sciences entrepreneur here in the Philadelphia market. So let's talk about the Philadelphia market, its evolution, what you're seeing, what your excitement level is for Philadelphia,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, sure. No. Philadelphia is where our headquarters is, and it's kind of, we love operating out of here. When we started, and historically, Philadelphia was a big pharma region, less known for biotech. Usually you would have to go to Boston or San Francisco, or if you wanted warm weather, you went down to San Diego, and they had there was a culture of it. Things popped up here. We've had some unbelievable stories here, from Centocor and Cephalon just emerging up, and and certainly now with Spark and all the work that was done out of Carl June's lab. But what has really changed here that we've seen is this explosion of the cell and gene therapy space. And if you look at it from Penn and CHOP, that sort of family of research there, it has been unbelievable what has transformed. I travel around the world, and Philly is the hotspot. It's a great place to be. There are just numbers of companies popping up, all the time. It is a great space to be for cell and gene therapy. And I think the community around it has done a very good job. Obviously, this from the space requirements that people need in the construction going on. But there's more of a core foundation of a lot of the work that's been done here that is coming to fruition. So now when we look at the cell and gene therapy space, Philadelphia is in my mind is leading it. Boston has a a great effort in it, and they're moving incredibly fast. So with San Francisco and San Diego, RTP, but Philly has a combination of that nice combination of institutions. Penn itself, you don't need to say much more about that. Its success speaks for itself, and the combination with the work at CHOP, it's been phenomenal. It's been really amazing. This is a great place to set up shop, and it's actually not terribly expensive to live here. That's a real benefit. I will tell you, just from an employee's sake.
Well, that's a great testimonial for Philly. And, with that, I just want to thank you for your time today. We've really enjoyed the conversation. And Patrick, much appreciated.
Great. Thank you. I enjoyed it.